Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today, we're going to answer a very common question we get asked. Does the ship leak? The spirit of this question is typically like, underwater, are we leaking? And the answer to that is no. No, our bilges are completely dry. When the ship was mothballed in 1990, 1991, all 300 plus odd sea chests were blanked over. Those are all the 3 through-hull openings. And since then, the ship has been maintained in really good condition underwater. So we do not have any leaks in the hull of the ship. Thank God. All of the other museum battleships, the ones sitting in salt water, have at various times during their career experienced leaks. And most of those vessels are older than us and have been preserved as museums for longer than us. So it's no surprise. We are long overdue for a dry docking period ourselves, which would go a long way towards keeping us leak-free. However, we have so far been very fortunate in not developing any significant leaks. I say as this bucket fills with water in front of me. We're currently down on second deck in the compartment called 2 TAC 115 TAC 2 TAC L. This is just the passageway outside of the machine shop. And the main deck berthing spaces overhead, which are currently set up as exhibit spaces on the museum, have an expansion joint that runs around the superstructure over them. The US Navy was very concerned with the rigidity of welds versus rivets. A riveted plate has a little bit of room to wiggle if it's expanding, contracting, or flexing as it goes through the waves. They were worried that welded seams were more rigid. The hull of the ship is primarily riveted together, but the superstructure is primarily welded. So right down the middle of the superstructure between the 2 funnels, there's an expansion joint where the 2 plates do not meet at all, and there's a rubber gasket inside of that. In a perfect world, that is maintained and it keeps the water out, and it means as we're sailing, the ship is able to flex there along the center line pretty well. That gasket has at some point failed, and we are in the process of welding a plate over it, but it seems like our wooden deck held water against the steel around that expansion joint and caused it to corrode. So water was able to leak in and be held against the rubber, and eventually the rubber rotted out, just like the steel had, and it lets water into the inside of the ship. So it comes into those exhibit spaces 1 deck above us, and then finds its way to the low spot in the room, which in this particular exhibit space, there's a ladder at the aft end of the room that doesn't have a hatch combing around it for whatever reason. So the water then works its way down here and leaks into this second deck passageway, where we do have knee knockers and other watertight fittings that keep the water right here. You'll notice that the deck around here, the tile is all ballooned up. The water gets under the tile. The leveling compound there, which is acidic, holds that water against the steel deck. The steel starts to bloom up with rust, which then breaks the leveling compound and pops the tile and breaks the adhesive on the back of the tile and causes this wavy pattern on the floor. We've fixed that in other places on the ship, but not in this passageway because we haven't fixed the leak that's causing it. Again, we've got a welder who's coming in during the week, and they are working along this expansion joint, repairing all of the damaged metal there, and in a week or 2, this particular leak will be fixed, and then we can work on the tile and everything else that has been caused by that leak. There are a small number of spaces around the ship that leak like this. Primarily, it is pieces of steel in the superstructure where the teak wood sits up against, and the teak holds water there, causes that steel to waste out, so the water gets in. So there's one space on the O2 level where a stuffing tube wasted away, so now water can get in through that and fills up in the passageway. There's one space back half near the ship's store that water is able to get through the hatch coaming. It's probably wasted out where the teak is pressed up against it and then leaks down into the vestibule outside the store. But other than spaces like this suffering from rainwater damage or intrusion, we don't have any significant leaks. Yeah, so just because we're sitting here, and I'm not sure we'll get another chance to talk about it, I am sitting on a shoring timber. This is right here by a shoring timber rack. And this is here to help prevent water intrusion. So let's say we take some holes here, the ship is starting to list and flood here on second deck. Well, we can use this shoring timber and some carpenter's crosscut saws and some woods and wedges and stuff to wedge patches in place as part of damage control. So for example, if that whole compartment back there floods, we can close this watertight door, but the weight of water there may cause this bulkhead to start to buckle. So you can use shoring timber like this to wedge it closed, or let's say there isn't a door here, the door is blown away for whatever reason, or there's a big hole here, we can press a patch up against it. That patch may be as simple as a mattress or an actual piece of steel, which is kept on hand for this sort of stuff. And then we wedge it in place using the shoring timber until we get out of combat or whatever the situation is, so that we can do a permanent repair. Besides what I've already talked about, the main way that water intrusion gets into a museum ship is the plumbing. While the Battleship is made out of rust-resistant armor plating in most places, the plumbing is standard mild steel, and on a ship of this age there are lots of places where patches have been made, so pieces of copper or brass pipe have been put up right against black iron pipe, have been put up against galvanized pipe, and so you get dissimilar metal corrosion. We can paint the outside of these pipes, but we can't paint the inside of these pipes, and that's where the water is running through. And so a number of times I've come in the morning to find a pipe that is wasted out and just emptied its contents onto the deck in some weird part of the ship that shouldn't otherwise be getting water intrusion. And that's one of the main concerns of a museum ship. Many museum ships like ours don't have traditional museum buildings or collection spaces for the artifacts we house. And good luck finding me a room on this ship that does not have some sort of plumbing going through it. So if there is some sort of leak in that plumbing, it could damage museum artifacts. So in summation, the hull of the ship does not leak at all yet. We are currently planning a dry docking, which will then extend the life of the hull another couple of decades. Since you're probably going to ask, you can bet if I'm still working here, we are going to video document the whole dry docking process. The simple truth of the matter is we are beginning to plan now, which means it'll be 2 to 5 years before it actually happens. There's a lot of work that has to go in on the back end before we can have the ship high and dry. So make sure you subscribe and keep watching the channel for the next half decade. There'll be some good stuff that comes out. So answering the original question, no, the ship is not leaking in the hull. Yes, the ship does occasionally take on water, primarily rainwater, either wasting away the drain pipes or finding its way through steel that's been rotted out by rotting wood and then gets inside the ship. We are in the middle of a 5-year, $5 million process replacing the teak wood deck, which will be completed before we start fundraising for the dry docking process. And if you're interested in supporting the deck restoration on the ship or the YouTube channel, there's a link in the description below. Battleship New Jersey does receive operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, but much of our support comes from other businesses and individuals like yourselves. You can also support the museum by liking, sharing, and subscribing so that more people find out about our channel and the museum. Thanks for watching.